Welcome to the second episode of Workbench with the Dad Batch. I am here with Jon Flake, JPFX Art on Instagram. Jon, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks for coming in, Ramey.
Yeah.
Thanks for being in my little humble abode here.
The drive here was absolutely beautiful. I couldn't have picked a better day to do it.
Yeah,
so thanks for having me out.
Yeah, the trip is never too hard when the ocean's sitting on your left side for 45 minutes.
Yes,
Exactly.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, I am a painter, fabricator, artist by hobby, I suppose. My trade is nothing related to this, and so I just kind of found this as something I really, really wanted to do. So
yeah, a lot of us, same. My day job has nothing to do with any of what we do in spaces like this. A lot of this is always an escape for us.
100%.
Is that very much kind of the same for you?
Yes, 100%. It was born out of the need for an escape. It was approaching burnout at work, and a friend of mine who was an engineer just recommended, like, oh, you should try 3D printing.
Yeah.
Like, you can make some of this stuff that you're talking about that you really like. And so she was like, and also, like, you need something outside of work. I was working way too much, obsessed with work, and so I needed that escape that, to some degree, movies and Star Wars had always been, but it wasn't maybe the same tactile experience that building or making something is.
Yeah, yeah. This was not a question that was on my normal list, but something that you've done that I think is always humorous and fascinates me is you work with kids in the day job, and I know that you have them watch Star Wars.
I do.
And then you post their feedback.
Yep.
And it's always hilarious to see what they say.
Yeah.
So what are some of the funnier things that you've had them come up with?
Well, I mean, I always see catching a kid that hasn't seen Star Wars as like a fascinating experiment of like where should you start? Some of this stuff is so ingrained in us, you almost can't unravel it. And so seeing someone that's a more or less a blank slate, except for Vader and Luke, every kid knows that.
Yeah.
That twist is ruined. And so the hottest takes I've heard were people thinking that Yoda is weird and that, like, annoying and annoying. Like to some degree that's the point in Empire. He's trying to be annoying. But that was a big one. I always ask kids how long it takes them to figure out that Palpatine is Palpatine in the prequels.
Oh,
because for us, it's obvious from the first scene, I think, for most people.
Yes.
But if you haven't watched the original trilogy, and most kids I start with better special effects, little quicker editing, so that they don't lose interest in a film that's in 1977. Okay. And they usually don't put it together. Like, they don't usually until when Anakin puts it together, or much later when they don't really associate Darth Sidious and Palpatine as the same person, at least until the second movie. First movie, it's not obvious to them, which I found kind of surprising.
Interesting. I know. It's kind of the Lego show kind of makes a joke of it, where he puts the hood up and takes the hood down.
It's just a little different voice, a little more eloquent when speaking to Padme, but that one kind of, I always assumed everyone picked it up really fast.
Right. They're also clearly not watching the credits.
No. No, absolutely not. I'm lucky if they're not on TikTok in between every single sequence. So, and I find that too is a lot of the things that they've seen massive chunks of it in 17 different cuts on TikTok, but they've never seen it as one long narrative.
That's interesting.
And it's kind of like my rage bait at work is when they're like, oh yeah, I've seen that movie, but like 3/4 of it on TikTok, and it's like, I can't even have this conversation with you. It makes me just so mad.
You're like, just stop.
Yeah.
So what got you focused? You started when I first met you. You were doing like the normal what I do, like costumes and helmets and blasters and things like that. But you've shifted since then. You've been doing a lot of creature painting and masks and miniatures and things like that, and moved from helmets to very organic things.
Sure.
How has that? I'm not
going to lean on that anymore.
Evolution gone for you?
Yeah, I mean, the originally, prop making was kind of born out of not necessity. It was one of those things where, I had a good friend that I worked with. She was an engineer in college and a biomechanical engineer, and we work in sports performance together, and we're both big nerds. And so I was always talking about how, I loved Star Wars licensed stuff, but I couldn't afford to buy a Master Replica's lightsaber or whatever, right? And so she was like, well, you can 3D print anything. You know what I mean? And so she was like, why don't you, she's like, a 300, and to me at that time, I was like, that's really expensive. That's what like dentists use and stuff. And she was like, no. Like, we used $200, $300 ones at school. Like, it was really easy. And I picked it up really fast. And she was like, you should look into it. And so my wife got me a 3D printer, and I was like, okay, like let's chase down these kind of iconic props that like I love, the blaster from Han Solo or Obi-Wan's lightsaber, and start to 3D print those things, because God knows of found parts, Obi-Wan's saber is not within the realm of possibility for most logical human beings. And so it just became okay, let's learn how to create this illusion of metal, right? And I found that super fascinating, that I could trick the eye from such a far distance, even the closer you get. And so it was like, okay, I want to have Han Solo's blaster, I want to have Obi-Wan's lightsaber, and that was kind of like the entry point. And then as time went on, my favorite alien creature has always been Admiral Akbar. And so that was just that always stood out to me in Return of the Jedi, and obviously it's become a meme 1,000 times over that everyone knows. But so the next thing on the list was like, okay, how do I find something? How do I get a cool Akbar item? And it just didn't exist. Yeah, there just weren't great sculpts out there. I couldn't find any people making it, and so in my professional career, I always sought out kind of the best of the best. I went and learned how to do performance training with people that were working in professional sports, and so to me, I just kind of applied that same thought process of like, okay, if this doesn't exist, then I need to go learn how to do this thing. And it's probably my longest ongoing project, in that like I started creature painting simply because I just wanted to make an Akbar mask. Right. But now I still feel like I'm building the requisite skill to do the thing that's in my mind that I don't think I necessarily have just yet. So I took a class with one of the guys that works at Legacy Effects and learned how to paint creatures. And it wasn't an Akbar mask because there was no great Akbar sculpt. There was a pretty good sculpt out there for the Frog Lady from The Mandalorian. Oh yeah. And he was like, this is actually a really good proving ground, because we can do a lot more with a frog, actually. There's a lot more real world stuff, because like, Akbar is kind of like a crab, and it's somewhat straightforward in his eyes. Whereas you'll learn a lot more through this Frog Lady mask. Yeah, and I mean, if you kind of take a step back, there's such a variety of frogs in the world to pull from. You could go anywhere with it. Exactly. And so he was like, look, this will give you better skill set, to then you could go execute this if you want to. And what I found over that 2-day class was that creature painting was way more intensive than metallic painting. Like, yes, like there are layers and steps that take time with metallic painting, but with creature stuff, I mean, we were painting for all in probably like 10 hours of actual painting, like not just 10 hours in the booth, but like 10 hours of physically moving the airbrush and creating layers. And I was very kind of like, this is going to turn out like crap. Like, this is not going to look good. And then eventually the illusion clicked, and you took a step back, and you're like, holy crap, that looks like skin. That looks like a real frog. And that kind of just dug its hooks into me, I think, where like I think it's all been driven by creating an illusion or storytelling through a physical object, but something about that offered a way more deeper experience, I guess. And I don't necessarily know why it resonated with me in the way that it has, because I didn't grow up a creature kid. A lot of the people you see that Phil Tippett grew up a creature kid, right? Like all these people that we know that kind of got into monster making really were kind of obsessed with it at a young age. And for me, I've come to appreciate it in a way that I didn't really expect. So that's kind of been the progression of seeking out another skill, and it just resonating with me in a way that I didn't really anticipate. Interesting. So let's talk about, we're going to get into the creature stuff here again in a little bit for sure. But let's talk about the space. So I'm looking around. I mean, obviously we've got the space here. So where do you want to start? I mean, because we've got, I see a paint booth. We've got, there's a collection space. There's printers. What's a good place to start? I mean, the paint booth is probably the place where I spend most of my time, and between these two benches back here in the booth is where I'm 90% of the time, 80% of the time. So it seems like a reasonable place to start. Okay, so talk me through the paint booth. So you built the paint booth yourself? Yeah, I did. When you were doing that, what were some of the considerations you put into it? Well, the biggest consideration was my neighbor. And that was that was part that you know, invention is born out of necessity a lot of times, and so I was doing a lot of painting just kind of out the garage door, and if she can hear us right now, I have a very finicky neighbor that doesn't like smells and sounds very much, and so she started to complain despite the fact it being on a very small scale, and so it was one of those things where like, okay, it will make sense for me to help my process, and it will also quiet our neighbors' complaints at the same time. And so it was both, you know, functional and selfish at the same time. And so at that point, I just kind of looked at YouTube videos and was like, okay, how does one build a booth?
How do you do this? Yeah.
And so there's a couple of good ones out there from Punished Props and Mike Makes Stuff and stuff like that. And so I just kind of went down that rabbit hole, and that was at the time where it was like the skill set was kind of scaling. I was looking at maybe getting an HVLP. I was looking at a bigger compressor for my airbrushes and stuff. So instead of it just living in a ad hoc space, it was like there needs to be a permanent home. And so I wanted it to have enough space that I could paint small stuff, or I could paint a pretty big costume piece, a big mask or a full set of armor or whatever, and it could catch all of that. And so that was kind of like my approach in building that was, you know, something that works right now, but also would scale as, you know, if ambitions for size of things grows, then I'm not limited and I'm not buying another one and making another one in a year.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've clearly got a lot of very custom electrical put into this with individual switches and things like that, so you can turn pieces on and off. There's lighting, custom lighting put into it, I can see.
Right.
Ventilation is key.
Right.
We were talking before, and you made a comment about the fan needing to be specific.
Yeah.
So you need a sparkless fan.
Yeah, like, so yeah, from a safety concern, you know, this is where my family lives, and so this is not an industrial shop that's set up for these things. So, you know, safety is always kind of something that comes into the thought process, especially with things that are flammable or caustic, right? And so I think when you look at hobbyist fans and stuff, or hobbyist booths a lot, it's, you know, it's a air conditioning fan that's pointed the opposite direction in a cardboard box, which is fine. But a lot of the things we use coming out of aerosol cans or lacquer paints are very flammable.
Yep.
Right? And so with a fan, as it wears down over time, the likelihood of a spark or something coming from the electricals or the motor is a lot more likely.
Yep.
And so, you know, I looked into fans that were specifically designed to have the internals locked into a case so that if there is a spark, it's contained in a place where it can never explode. And that was just something that never dawned on me. What happened was, and it's something that I ended up with a fan much bigger than I expected, right? But it's been great because it's like I said, it's allowed me to scale. I kind of was thinking it was a smaller version, and it came this gigantic fan. I was like, holy hell, this is going to be a bigger thing than I thought. But it's been great because I can vent almost anything that a hobbyist is going to paint, right? And so, yeah, it was a simultaneous like learning on the spot of like what's safe, what's not, how can I build this within, you know, reason. I would love to have a fabricated metal booth, but that wasn't something I was going to spend money on at the time. And so, yeah, but it was also the first thing I ever really built out of wood, other than like wood shop in high school. So it was like a crash course in right angles and things that will be sturdy, and it holds more stuff. There was more accidental storage space put into it than I had expected, but it's actually been really, really useful.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of the approach to building that, and it's definitely where I spend most of my time is staring into the dirty walls of that thing and figuring out what's going to come out of it.
No, it looks like a great design.
I like it a lot, actually.
Yeah. So what other painting space do you have? So you've got these two workbenches here, and there's a compressor here, but what happens over here?
So this is kind of like, I describe it as like the assembly area.
Okay.
Like, this is where all like my glues are that like for different types of things. So like if I'm 3D printing, I'm sticking on something to a mask or whatever, this is where things can kind of live before they come to like the main stage where they're going to be worked on actively.
Got it.
And so this is where model kits get glued, latex gets stuck to a mask, trimming happens, stuff like that. And then if it needs to be staged here for a while before it can go over there, that's kind of like, it's like the transition to the main work spot.
Got it.
And then the main is, closest to the booth where I do most of like my paint mixing. All my paints are in the workbench behind us, and it's, drawer to drawer to drawer, kind of basically paints I use the most, paints that don't get used as much, paints that never get used, and then things that might be added to a costume or something, Velcros, padding, stuff, all is kind of work your way down. I kind of tried to follow some of Adam Savage is what you call like first order retrievability is what he describes it as, is what do you reach for the most? And if that should be the nearest to you.
Yeah.
Right. And so like, that's kind of how I've tried to evolve that, is to, I think with all of us, you know, that don't do this for a living, and I'm sure with people that do it for a living, but you know, the less friction there is to making, the less likely you are to do it. Right.
Yeah.
And so if something is easily gotten to, easily brought into the workflow, then you're more likely to, hey, I've got half an hour, I'll do a couple layers of paint on this mask or whatever, as opposed to, I gotta go find this skin tone or that. And so I know where all my skin tones are, I know where all my primary colors are, I know where my inks are. And so that's kind of how I have that stage where it's like, coming soon, right now in theaters, big production, finish, and be done from there, you know?
Perfect. So over here we've got some printers.
Yeah.
So I see several resin printers and an FDM. So talk me through your printer setup.
I just completely overhauled it in the last 2 months, actually.
Okay.
Like every single one of those is new in the last 2 months.
That Prusa's brand new.
Yep, it only just came out. I was a big bamboo guy for quite a while. I loved my X1 Carbon. It's a great printer. I did not love my H2D though.
Okay.
Not that it was a bad printer, but it got more complicated than I really need and for my needs, and it had a little bit more finickiness to it as a result of the complexity of it. And for me, I wanted something was simple and straightforward and had a lot of space to print and was reliable. And you know, looking at the way that printers work, you know, a bamboo is going to be replaced by a new bamboo in 2 years. Whereas a Prusa, you can build a kit that will upscale with the ecosystem. And so like you're kind of locked in for 5 years where you can upgrade with it as you need. And so I decided to kind of go down that path of, I'm probably not going to want to buy a new printer every 6 months to a year if I want to have the best. And then on the resin side of it, like anybody else, I've fiddled around with resin and temperatures of your garage and heating and all those things that are a huge pain. And for me, I'm not interested in 3D printing as a hobby. I'm interested in it fueling my hobby.
It's a tool.
Right? Yeah, it's a tool, right? And so I don't want to, when the weather changes, which to be fair in Santa Barbara is not a lot.
Not that bad of a problem here.
Yeah, exactly. But I shouldn't be complaining. I know Mike gets mad at me every single time I complain about weather.
It is a different beast where he's at.
100%. 100%. But you know, hay gears has been newer on the market. They're not maybe as well known amongst the maker community. And they get a little bit of a bad rap because they're kind of a lock-in. Like you need to buy their proprietary resins. But with that comes, they know the setting. You don't have to fiddle with the setting. The bed is heated. Everything is basically automated for you so that like you just put the resin in there, put the file in and print it. And it gives genuinely some of the best prints I've ever seen. And so
interesting.
It was the same process as removing friction. Right.
Yeah.
That like I wanted to, especially as I'm going to have a family soon. That the ability to thank you. The ability to devote time. I don't want it wasted. Resin settings. Yes. I want the thing and I want to make it. Right. And so the whole way I've been shifting my workshop is how do I improve the workflow and remove friction so that with what little time I have to devote to it, that I maximize it. Yeah. So that's been kind of the approach with the 3D printing setup, and it's
Colin and I talked about this on the last episode a little bit. Sometimes the 3D printing turns into the hobby itself. And you see these guys that like, they're printing parts for the printer and like the printing becomes the hobby and it just turns into this whole beast.
Yeah.
I'm like you, I need the printer to produce a part so that I can get on with my project. And I just need it to work.
Yeah.
So I'm not printing something so the printer can be cooler. I just,
it's real, and like I've already felt the benefits of it where it's just like, you know, I haven't had to devote a lot of time to it. Troubleshooting is non-existent. I mean, we're spoiled now, right? Like there was a time where
these machines are
like I'm complaining, but it's also like, you know, there was a time where I was, you know, sliding papers under nozzles and leveling stuff that like I will never go back to. And I'm glad I know those skills, but I also now know enough about them that I know I don't want to do them. It's not why I got into this. So that's kind of where I'm at with the 3D printing. But that's actually the one area of the shop that has kind of never changed. That is just, that bench is probably, I gotta think 60 years old. It came with the house, and it just kind of, when I got kicked out of the kitchen in the living room, when this was like a home gym down here, that just seemed like a logical place for printers. There's a these didn't exist yet. Like there were no additional workbenches. And it just like it clearly had been used as a workbench for many years previous to me being part of it. And so I was like, yeah, this just seems like a good place for these to live. And it's never changed.
Yeah. So in making a workspace for yourself, what considerations did you put into building the space that made it fit you, that fit your workflow?
Yeah.
So how did you make this space yours?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's been an evolution as I've figured out what I am.
Sure.
Right. Like, I think I see myself most primarily as a painter. Right. That like that's like I can fabricate things. I can do all these other skills, and I will if necessary. But ultimately, the painting thing is the thing that I like.
Those other things are to get a piece to the point where you can then paint it.
Yeah. Sure. And so like it's been leaning into how do I upscale the painting side of this, and how do I make the painting side of this really easy to make work. And so it's become a space that was originally more maybe a fabrication space, and now it's a little bit more of like a painting space.
Yeah.
And so that was the biggest evolution, is that what came a bigger compressor and a whole area just devoted to painting, so that there's a reason it's closest to the door, both functionally from a ventilation standpoint, but also like I can just walk in and just paint.
Yeah.
And then I can leave again in 10 minutes if I need to,
or
whatever. And so it's, again, removing as much friction as I possibly could. But it's also like I wanted it to be a space where I actually wanted to be. That I actually, to an element of like, that's why all this sort of stuff is displayed close to where I paint, because I kind of want to use it as inspiration. I've got people that I really respect as painters that are represented here. There's sculptors that I've learned from, and different ideas of different skin tones and eyes and different things. So stuff that's kind of close that inspires me to kind of, if I need to sit down and take a look at something on the couch, I can, or like I can just get right back to painting. And so it's leaned much more towards painting and balancing a display area to some degree.
Yeah.
That it's, there has to be a place for all these things to live, as they can get sold or moved on, but there are things that I do want to stay. And so it's been, how do you balance, a workspace with a display space? And so, and so I don't know if I have that balance down just yet, but it's an evolving thing over time for sure.
That's part of the fun, and honestly kind of part of the hobby too.
Yeah, I think so.
Gives you something to kind of curate and evolve.
Totally.
So what's your kind of go-to tool? What do you have to have kind of in any workspace that you've got?
It's gonna feel on the nose, but an airbrush.
Sure.
Like it.
Okay.
I spend so much time with an airbrush in my hand, and I think that it is such a great tool to begin with, in terms of like, yes, it's not going to cover as much ground as a spray gun, but if you're really motivated, you can paint something really big with an airbrush, right?
Yeah.
You can get really far with that. And I think that it's such a achievable entry-level tool that is, if you learn how to take care of it, you may only need one.
Yeah.
Right? That like...
So they sell airbrushes from the gamut, like from $15 all the way up to hundreds of dollars.
Yeah.
So let's talk through that a little bit.
Sure.
So I know that there's like dual action airbrushes and single action airbrushes. And so talk for our viewers a little bit about that ecosystem a little bit.
Yeah.
Like I'm guessing you use a higher end airbrush, but that maybe isn't what you started with, for example. I
have my workhorse.
Okay.
And I have my my display piece, expensive guy. And
okay.
So I think that the Eclipse HPCS, the Iwata Eclipse is like an unbelievable workhorse. It can do all ends of the spectrum. It can move some paint. It can be pretty fine detailed. And it's a pretty good entry level. It's like $180.
Yeah.
Which is like it's not like cheap, but it's not going to massively break the bank. And it's extremely simple and well constructed, to the point where if you invest in learning how to take care of it, you may never need anything maybe than like a new needle at some point if you just dent your needle. That's maybe the only thing that might need to be replaced. And so it's so simple to care for and so versatile, and can open up such a world of, you can paint metal with it. I can paint creatures with it. If I had to travel somewhere to make something, I would only bring that. You know what I mean? And I can get a long way into that process by doing that. And so I also have my Micron, which is much more expensive and is not the type of thing that you should invest in if you haven't painted, but it has its big benefits, right? And so it's like it does allow you to have some of these really fine details and really close lines that kind of help sell a creature creation, but it's not something you should get in the first few years of painting because it's just silly to spend over $400 on an airbrush if you're not going to use it often, and you're likely to break it. And it's much more expensive to fix. It's a little bit more fine piece of machinery, but I mean, you can genuinely, if you spend $180 on an Iwata Eclipse and $40 on a compressor, you're pretty far into being able to learn a lot about paints and a lot of how to build a skill set. And so, like, you know, I see that as kind of like the non-negotiable. And having been fortunate enough to learn from a lot of people working in Hollywood and legacy effects and morphology and stuff, everyone's got one of those in the toolkit. Yeah. And it's the one they go to first and foremost. And they have brushes for certain effects and certain things. And the Pache has its place for certain effects, but everyone has this thing and goes to that first and then has their specialty stuff. And so like that was, and you don't have to, just because a brush is more expensive doesn't make it better than the Eclipse. I think it's kind of that perfect everyman tool sort of thing.
Nice. What would be an upgrade that you'd make to the space if you had unlimited time and money?
I would change out the spray booth for a completely metal fabricated booth that I could clean easily and isn't made out of materials that absorb paints and things like that. I kind of like...
It's got so much character.
That's what I mean.
Look at it.
That, on the flip side of the coin, I do like the character and I do like the kind of like, oh, it's been used and used a lot. And I do enjoy that aspect of it.
It tells a story.
But that being said, if I'm ever going back to painting metal stuff, dust nibs are the enemy. And this guy loves to trap some dust nibs some paint nibs, right? And so, like, for creature stuff, it's amazing. Yeah. But for going back to metal stuff where the environment is such a big factor in how you create that illusion, I would want a booth that I could scrub down and make very, very clean for metallic painting. But I don't feel the need for that. But if I had one change, and that would also probably be, which is funny enough, is resurface the entire garage and make it level. Oh. It's not a level floor, and it is a pain, and that was part of why the display cases are the way they are now, is because they would have to have these detolfs that were like, you know, Leaning Towers of Pisa type of look, and I just hated it. Yeah. And so being things on the wall, but even the wall isn't perfectly level, but I figured out. But yeah, I would resurface the whole floor in a way that was like nice and easy to clean and very level, which just seems random, but what's funny about it too is that my father-in-law kind of suggested this like 7 or 8 years ago, and I was like, are you insane? I hadn't gotten into painting yet. Like, it was just a storage space. He was like, yeah, but you know, you might use it. It's kind of great to have those sort of things ready if you need to. And I was like, your dad is crazy. Like, we're not doing that. And now I'm like, I should have listened to father-in-law on this, because it would have been a great idea.
Now you'd have to pull all this stuff out. It'd be a big project.
Extremely daunting task on top of money, you know. And so one day, but not this day.
Yeah, to be fair, that was the question. Yeah. Unlimited money. All right, let's talk about some of your techniques.
Sure.
So what are some of the techniques that you put into your projects that you're particularly proud of? And I think what I want to do is I want to grab two pieces.
Sure.
I want to go get like a blaster, something that you've painted that's some of the hard surface, the metal, and I want to grab something organic, the mask.
Sure.
And we can kind of talk through both of those pieces. So my eyes keep going to this alien over here.
Vlania?
Yeah.
Vlania the Vampirist?
So let's grab that and then maybe a blaster that you've done.
Maybe the K-Vest one there on the bottom. That one's all
this one here?
That's all resin. Yeah. You can just grab it, yeah.
So let's talk through the techniques that go into these separate pieces and how they differ.
Yeah, for sure. Both labor intensive, you know, in their own ways.
Yeah.
You know, obviously it's a large object. Vlania is a large object, so there's a lot of different things that kind of go into creating that, alongside, you know, the teeth are all hand sculpted, so that takes a minute so that they look, you know, they meld together the right way, they fit in the mouth the right way, and so that was something I hadn't really tackled before, is sculpting anything by hand.
Yeah.
And the thing that I really like about it is it's got a ton of character, right? And I kind of tried to lean into that, like adding this necklace that doesn't come with the kit or anything like that. It's just, it kind of screamed out to have some sort of ruby or something that, like, while she's clearly past her prime, she might still care about,
some little bit of vanity there.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and I think the thing that I really enjoyed about the process of this was kind of twofold, was learning this technique of trying to sink veining into the skin and how you make that illusion happen, and how you, create shapes that genuinely read as veins, but also how do you make that seem like it's living below the surface and not just sitting on top.
Right. Yeah, and before we started, we were talking about that, because on something metallic, the light stops on the surface, and in fact gets reflected back.
Right.
There is no depth to this object, whereas with this, the light actually, and in fact, this actually is a hard surface. It's not translucent material, but you have to create the illusion that there is depth there.
Right.
So the techniques that go into this are radically different.
Right, and so, I mean, something like the blaster kind of represents, there's a few different colors on there, but the base, the barrel, the handle, they're all, a primer layer, a clear layer, a metallic layer, and a sealed layer. Whereas this, it's a base coat, a little bit of veining, a speckle coat, another bit of veining, another coat. So it's layer upon layer upon layer upon layer to create that illusion, so that when you get really close to it, you see these little bits of red and discoloration that you would see in your own skin. Like it's not pure white or pure blue or pure yellow. There's lots of that represented throughout the skin, and you're kind of trying to create that imperfection of skin. They're not, maybe you are creating an alabaster type of skin, but this is an old shriveled vampire, god. And so we want to make sure that it belies that kind of storytelling through the execution. And so
how many layers would you say there are on her?
Probably about 14.
Wow.
Yeah, probably about 14. There's and some of that comes with making mistakes. I think that's part of this process, is I know that it doesn't jump out to people that don't know it, but I can see 4 or 5 mistakes right now that I don't like. But I'm still very proud of the piece. I think it's really cool and very striking, and the sculpt from Casey Love is amazing. And so, your job as a creature painter is to take the amazing work of the sculptor, if you aren't the sculptor, and to punch that up. To really bring out the details of what Casey put into this, that he didn't have to make the ears so much like a bat, but it's a very bat ear. And so we want to make sure that those kind of details are called out alongside your interpretation. In an area like this, you're going to do what the sculpt tells you. But in an area like this, it's mostly just blank. There's not a huge amount of detail. That's kind of your canvas to kind of add your interpretation or your additional kind of illusion. And so it's make a mistake, sink it into the skin so that it actually looks cool. Maybe change the vein on top of it so that it's actually another sub-layer.
Blend it.
And so it's one of those things where it allows for happy accidents to turn really cool. Like one of the things that I really love about this, that I wasn't really trying to do, but it was something I'll do in the future, is that this final layer of blood is a mixture of super glue and acrylic paint. And this super glue dries. It's actually this exact super glue right here. It's this clear
Gorilla Glue.
Gorilla Glue. Super flexible, very clear, very shiny, right? You can mix any acrylic into it, thin it with alcohol if you need to, and it has this really convincing effect of wetness that stays. And I kind of globbed it on there thinking, like I'll try to mimic the messiness of having attacked someone. But what happened is I globbed it on so heavy that it just ran off and dripped. But that's like exactly what would happen, right?
Sure,
and so
that was a natural effect.
And so like I love how it looks, and it wasn't something I planned, but that's like, okay, I'll use that in the future, right? Instead of trying to be so neat and try to be too smart where you're trying to mimic it, just slop it on there, because that's what would happen, and let the story kind of tell itself. But yeah, this is represents probably 2 full days of painting, like 8 hours a day, so like 16 hours of work to get to that point.
And imagine having to do an entire body suit for like a full body character in a film.
Yeah.
how many hours would have to go into that.
Totally.
And they have to make more than one.
Yeah, exactly. There's a stunt one, there's a hero one, and yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's an immense amount of work that goes into that. And I think as someone who understands what goes into that now, it's like, it's when those critiques get lobbied at the artists. You're like, hey, look, you had 5 years to work on your Mando suit, and this guy had 5 days to create 5 of them, and so you kind of have to keep that in mind with the execution. Is like the artists are kind of pulling off some pretty amazing feats in a very short period of time, whereas I could fiddle with this paint job for ages if I wanted to.
Yep. I think for season 3 they had to make 60 some odd suits in 3 months.
Right. It's crazy, right? Just printing that would take me 3 months. You know what I mean? It's molding that, whatever. And so I think that what does get pulled off in that short period of time is actually kind of mind-blowing, really.
Yeah.
But it takes having done it to kind of appreciate it, I think.
Yeah. And I noticed you've got like a piece here, if I can pick this up.
Yeah, you should be fine. It's a little heavy, but...
Yeah, you got a piece here, like...
It's all solid resin. So.
I can see that something like this to have around would be interesting, because like as you're working on other pieces and you need to see like, oh, well, what would this look like?
Right.
You could roll over here and look at it and have an example of such a variety of different eyes and skin tones and like different depths and how shadows would move and things like that. So you've got a lot of variety here of things you can look at and reference as you're working. And you mentioned that earlier, which is why I bring it up. But you got a great kind of library of things that you can reference to see the different tones. And the more I look at these, I see just in the wrinkles and how it picks up the paint and the washes and the flecks and speckles.
Right.
So, and the different eyes and the glossiness of the eyes versus the dullness of the skin.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that was a fun class that I took, and like I think that was the way that Jordu Shell was a great sculptor and painter that works in the effect industry for a long time, an amazing artist. But I think that was kind of the idea, is to make this a reference piece so that you have different ways to look at different illusions and different kind of starting points. Like, okay, I liked this technique, but for this character, this is what I'm maybe going to start with this, and then kind of going to edit that. And so, yeah, I try to put as much stuff in the space that will give me ideas and inspiration as I can. I think a sterile space is a bit boring. Yeah. Outside of creating clean metal. You want sterile then, but everything else is a mess, and some inspiration I think is good.
Is there like a signature technique or something that you always do, something you sneak into all your projects, or anything that, like, would I be able to look, having talked to you about this, would I be able to walk away and then look at something and be like, oh, Jon did that? Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to weathering, metallic stuff, I have never not used Createx Bloodline Decay color. I think that it's like the most versatile color that exists for weathering. It can be made very, very dark, almost black, reddish black, a deep brown, or it can be made very light, kind of like almost like an amber hue sort of vibe to it. And so while I never weather in one color, it's always one of the colors that goes on there, and it always adds an incredible amount of depth and interest to the piece. And I think, that if I've weathered 40 pieces, 38 of them have decay on them. And I think it's just, there's something about that color that really jumps out and just kind of adds that additional beyond the black or the brown. Nice. So I think that would be the one that I go to. And I weirdly, when it comes to metallic stuff, still really love like rub and buff. Like just basic old school rub and buff. I use it all the time. I think it's such a convincing effect if done well, and taking something like a chip brush where it's got already uneven bits and pieces to it and just kind of hitting it and letting it see what happens. Like, it's such a convincing effect, and I use that so often on things. And like, I think that those would be kind of maybe two signatures in the metallic world. I think that in the creature world, I definitely don't have a signature yet. I think it's more... Still working. It's still working on it. Yeah. I would love for one point the eyes to be my signature. To me, that is the hardest part of the process, and it is the make or break. Yeah. If your creature's skin looks great, but your eyes look terrible, the entire effect is ruined. And so I think that's the rabbit I'm constantly chasing, is trying to improve the quality of the eyes and the illusion you can create there, and the
the dynamism of it. I think that that's something I'm really trying to hone in on, is not just eyes looking straight forward, but they tell you something, they're looking elsewhere, they're doing something. And I find that very difficult. And so I think that I would hope one day that my eyes are the signature for me, but I think right now it's still, I don't think I've mastered metallic painting, but I know a really good amount about it. And I think that I'm just still on that journey of maybe what my signature is. I will say that looking at all my work, I'm clearly really drawn to pale white skin type of things. I have so many pieces that are kind of in that color hue of 3 or 4 or 5 different ones. And so I think that I'm really drawn to that pale, sickly, off-white, purple below the surface type of vibe.
With the little pink flecks. And,
yeah. So like, I think that if there's something that I'm definitely drawn to, it's that. But I think that I think that there's such a wide variety of skill sets in creature painting and different hues and colors and types that my signature doesn't quite exist just yet. That I'm more of a generalist, I think, probably.
Out of curiosity, if somebody came to you and said, all right, we're offering you a job in creature painting, would you take it?
I think it would depend on what that job was. I think that, I think a lot of people can offer jobs in creature painting, and what that means is you're running silicone masks for the guy that really paints it.
Yeah.
I've always thought, like, one time it might be fun, take 2 weeks off of work and go work on a production. And that seems kind of silly to moonlight in someone's career to some degree, but if it's given the opportunity to put something on screen, that's kind of maybe always been a hidden dream of mine a little bit. And so I think that I would I wouldn't quit my day job. I wouldn't stop running my business, but I would definitely entertain the idea of and I think there are times where productions have overflow, right? Where they reach out to individual makers and say, hey, we need you to, we can't make 60 pieces of armor. We need a couple of executed outside of the shop or whatever. That's rare, but it happens.
It happens.
And so, I think I would be interested in something like that, where, to contribute a small background piece. And I think I'd be, as an artist, be paranoid of it being a hero piece, because it's going to be under such intense scrutiny. And if you don't execute it, then you're kind of ruining the whole thing. But if one of my aliens was walking around in the background, I think that would be cool. So I think I would entertain the idea, but I would be hesitant for sure. And I think that's just lack of comfort, right? Like, it's in my career, I wouldn't think twice about it, but it's something that is a little more personal to me, I guess. Yeah. That there's a little bit more of exposing your art to the world.
Yeah, your own self-doubt.
Totally.
What's your biggest challenge when you're building something, when you're working on a project? What's something that you are comfortable with, or that you'd have someone else do instead of doing it yourself?
I mean, first and foremost is definitely cut and sew. I have actively avoided cut and sew in a almost absurd degree at this point. And it's funny because my wife went to FITM and did fashion school. She has a sewing machine, and so she could easily teach me. But for something about that process is so foreign to me that once you're down the rabbit hole, it's actually generally not as hard as you probably think in most of those cases. There's always challenges for sure. But for me, it's been cut and sew, and I've kind of hoped to challenge myself a little more, create some sort of drape or something for this to add to the character. Or I've always kind of eventually hoped to make an Akbar bust, because I've got the comm badge, and so it's to add that little bit of white fabric and tie that into a complete kind of character representation.
To kind of have maybe this much of him.
Yeah, exactly, because it doesn't exist out there in the world, and so that's always been on the back burner. But I think, alongside skills that I don't necessarily have, and I don't know why, but that doesn't excite me as much. Do you know what I mean? It's the idea of creating this, while daunting, excites me. The idea of creating a robe doesn't excite me in the same way, and I'll be mad about how it turned out, kind of thing. And so, whereas even failures, you're oh, okay, yeah, this sucks, but I can see how I would make this really good. And so, and I'm sure that's the same with cut and sew. But other than that, a lot of times it's just getting started. Sometimes a project seems so daunting that you just don't even begin. And so it's for me, I'm always just take the first step forward. If it gets backburnered, it gets backburnered or whatever, but just keep, until you really hit a roadblock, just see how far you can get with it. And I've found that it's actually, our barrier to entry is a lot of times just beginning the project. And so I've been trying to just be more willing to, within reason, and not just start projects and never finish them, but be I say that the Akbar is the longest running project, but it's only because it's such a character that's so special to me that like I need it to represent exactly what I want it to look like. Whereas something like this, it's like I didn't have an attachment of Lania, so I was happy to finish the project and to get it to the point where it was like, yeah, this is done. This is a creature.
Yeah.
Whereas Akbar, I'm like, oh, the eye's not quite the color I kind of envisioned or whatever. And so, yeah, so I think it's for me, I've avoided cut and sew, and I've tried to get better about just starting projects and not being daunted by the project.
Yeah.
The Predator is like that for me. The Predator is the daunting project that is an incredibly detailed paint job that I would love to have, but I haven't had the guts to start going down that rabbit hole, especially because sometimes the art you're trying to the art you're trying to mimic or to represent is so good. Like Steve Wang is so good at what he does that it almost doesn't belie how difficult and ornate that paint job actually is. And so, yeah, I'm trying to get past the fear of that one. But
as we look at the Predator.
Yeah, as a blank Predator sits right there. Yeah, as you can tell, I've gotten really far in the process. Especially I want to hand sculpt all the dreads, which you can see the blank holes in the back of that mask. There's a lot of those. And so, and I'll be happy that I did when I do it, but it's a daunting task for sure. Especially when it's iconic like that.
Yeah.
It's an iconic creature, right? And so you want it to feel iconic in the collection when it exists there.
Yeah, literally everybody will recognize it.
Exactly.
So we've got a couple projects here, sitting here with the K-Vest Blaster and the Vampire. What are some of the other big projects that you've completed in this space?
I did a whole entire... when you first got to know me, I did a whole entire Mando armor just in this garage before it was even really it was all airbrush, no HVLP, all clad on the helmet. And honestly, like, still very happy with how that original armor turned out. Like, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but I had enough people at Celebration come up to me and be like, this is really good.
Nice.
Like, this looks really good. And that's always a cool feeling, especially as something that was my first foray into a full costume. So it was a really cool feedback. And then, like any maker, I got better at it, and I decided to do the entire suit over again with more skills and more know-how to try and, it was like, oh, I can make the helmet better. But so that one was like, the first and foremost kind of like, those when I first kind of came down out of the living room and started doing stuff in the garage. And so that will always, and it's funny because that helmet actually lives with one of the NBA players that I trained.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, they NBA or franchises usually do a Star Wars night, sports teams do a Star Wars night. He's a really big Star Wars fan, and so some guys will show up in a t-shirt. For every Star Wars night, he shows up in a full costume. And so he knew that I made this stuff and gave me a call and was like, hey, like, can I get that Mando helmet for, Star Wars night in a couple weeks? And I was like, sure. So now it lives with him, which I think is just kind of a cool story. And I always kind of talk about it as like my two worlds coming together.
Yeah.
Where it's like the art world and my professional world kind of being mixed, and it's kind of a cool thing. So like I kind of like that it lives with him in a weird way.
Yeah, it's where it belongs.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like a strange moment where you're like, holy hell, like, so yeah.
So what's the most rewarding project that you've worked on?
When I finish Akbar. Yeah.
So is the mask that I'm looking at over here, is that one you've done?
Yes.
Okay.
That's V1. There's a blank sitting in the booth right there now that I want to make V2. It's more like really cool paint job. It looks really good. Looks like Akbar, but like I want to kind of do like exactly like it looks like in Return of the Jedi, or at least from the behind the scenes photo in the creature shop or something, and then make that bust. Like, like get the comm badge on there, get the fabric, so it's a complete character. But most rewarding outside of that, funnily enough, I still really love my Han Solo blaster that's all steel. That, like,
Can I grab it?
Yeah, please do. Yeah, it's a real heavy guy. I need to go in and clean some of the rust off of him, so he's patinaing for real. But it was kind of the first prop outside of 3D printing where I did a deep dive and got the steel kit from Blaster Factory, and I read the 140-page long RPF forum on the accuracy of what it's supposed to, because the prop doesn't exist anymore. So I think I love the story behind it. That this was filmed in the UK. Bapti rented out the stuff to the production, couldn't ship it back to America, so it was dismantled, no longer exists. People have tracked down the base Mauser to other movies and can prove that it's that one. And so for me, it was like this really, really deep dive and prop replication and like, to me, I think it's one of the 2 or 3 most iconic props in film history.
Yeah.
It's like, so that one, it sits at the center of the collection for a reason. It's always going to be one that I care for and make sure the rust doesn't build up too much on it. And it still kind of like functions like a Mauser, which is kind of cool. So like obviously there's no barrel, there's no hole in it, but it's like, it functions exactly like a Mauser would if there was a barrel and could fire bullets, right?
Yeah.
And so I kind of love that story. And like I said, I've never done as much research on a thing as I did learning the little bits and pieces and the scratches and the story behind it. And so like it'll always be something I really love and will never ever get moved on from the collection. And the cool part about it is like, I love metal painting. I couldn't create a patina this good if I wanted to.
It's real rust.
It's real steel.
Yeah.
And so it ages in a beautiful way with a real patina. And so like, and it constantly lives as a reference for metal painting in the future of things that rust naturally. And so, yeah, it took me weeks and weeks and weeks to kind of, because I had no skills at that point to do this. And so it always sits as something that I love and will always stay with my collection. And that one is always just near and dear to my heart. And like I said, Akbar, one day when he gets finished, will be probably that. I think on top, other than that, it's like, I really love the face hugger that I did. Like, and it's just, I think it's such an iconic design, and it's sitting over there on the top right.
Over here, okay.
Yeah, and I think it's like such a amazing piece of creature design where it's like if you look at the entire life cycle of the xenomorph, I think it's just the most horrifying creature that it face rapes you, it leaves you with something popping out of you, and then that thing hunts the rest of you. And so like, I think there's something so universal about that fear of like, everyone thinks that's horrifying and disgusting. And so, yeah, I think that like is such an effective piece of creature design that has never really been topped in my eyes. Right. And so I really love that I finally, because a lot of times the process for me has been seeking out things that I can't really find. Up until I didn't see a lot of great facehugger stuff out there. There was some cool things, but
we've seen a little more of it lately.
Yeah,
it seems like there's been a bit of a renaissance of that.
Totally.
So
yeah, it's like seeking out things that don't exist. The Akbar, the facehugger, and so it's like, maybe one day I'll build the full size Yoda. So I got a lot of like eventual crowning jewels, but I've kind of slow playing it, and like, I'm trying to be patient in building the skills and not building something I'm not happy with.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of how I approach it now.
Yeah.
Instead of rushing to the end.
Building up the skills. We talked about that earlier. It's like collecting the skills rather than collecting the pieces themselves.
Yeah, and so I think every piece that isn't licensed or something like that says something about something that inspires me or something that I learned, right? Or they're placeholders, right? It's like I have a Lineage Mando helmet that I haven't painted yet, but it's sitting where it will get painted one day, and I'll take the skills that I've learned from Sam of how to do it correctly, and so it's I think that's always like the tool belt, and I think there is a really cool thing that happens with that. I think where each project you have to go. I have to go do this. I have to learn that or whatever. But then eventually you have these projects. You're like, okay, I know how to do this. I know how to do that. I can do this, and then you don't need anyone's help. You didn't look at YouTube, and you're like, holy shit! Like I'm an artist. I'm a maker. I did the thing. I didn't need anybody else's help to do this, and so those are becoming more and more frequent for me, which I think is maybe the part that I'd be the most proud of, as opposed to just one physical thing.
Nice. Yeah. Very cool. What's next? What's either on your workbench now, or what's next? I mean, I see the blank Akbar. Is he next, or you got something between now and him?
I've been weirdly getting into shifting gears again and getting into the scale modeling stuff.
Okay.
And I've always loved that history of ILM and scale modeling.
Yeah.
And
that's been we've had a big year for ILM.
Yeah,
obviously.
Exactly. With Doug Chang's book and the ILM 50 book and the 50th anniversary, and so I've really loved kind of diving into that a little bit more. And part of that is like logic of like, I'm going to be a dad soon, and
true
model kits can be built with no glue at the kitchen table, and I can still make some stuff even if I'm kind of taking care of the little guy.
Keeping an eye on.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's something like, okay, you have something you can fuel the maker need with when you don't have the time to come down here. And I think for me, it's always like, the next creature thing is like, okay, like that's sitting there. I have a really great Nikto mask that I want to do. That's probably the next on the the docket from a creature standpoint, and it's not a crazy complex paint job. Like I know how that needs to get done, and so like from a creature standpoint, that one will get done. But and then looking long down is eventually the R2 build. That I decided, I was talking about this with my mom and my wife, was that like I kind of want my kid to grow up in a world where R2 is real for a while, and so hopefully by the time they're old enough, R2 is done, and so that they get to live with that magic for them. I think that I've been thinking more and more about how I can kind of use the skills that I have to create that magic for them when they're younger, and when it's totally real at that point. And so that's kind of like the shift that's been happening for me. And also like when when they get to the point of seeing more violent things, being able to be like, hey, let's go downstairs. Let me show you, let the dad show you how this was made.
Because then that shifts it from being something that's scary to something that they can appreciate as a piece of art and stuff.
Right, exactly. And so like I wanted to be like, hey, look, real world violence is bad, but that hand you saw that creeped you out, we can make one of those and I'll show you how to do it.
Yeah,
and so,
it's just
and hopefully it'll
rubber and paint.
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully it'll unlock that curiosity and that interest, and maybe they'll be interested, maybe they won't. I don't think you get to pick what resonates with you. It just you can try and encourage them to like something that's going to be what it's going to be. Yeah, I mean that's what I mean. Is I think painting is a great example. My family was like, really, like you're really into this now, and I'm like, yeah, like it just weirdly resonates with me, and I don't really necessarily know why.
Yeah, exactly. So what? Who inspires you? Is there a builder out there that you try and emulate, or who's been an inspiration for you?
I mean, I've been really fortunate to have the proximity to LA and Hollywood, and maybe if it's not the production home right now, it's the spiritual home of film. It's coming back, but there's a lot of really great artists down there that I've been fortunate enough to make connections with and learn from. That guys like Jordu Shell and Joe Harlow and the Rosengrant family, Derek, all these people that if you look at behind the scenes stuff, in the most iconic special effects, you're going to see the name Rosengrant, you're going to see the name Hensley, and like those are all guys that have. So I've been really fortunate to be able to hang out with those artists and learn stuff from them and call them friends and stuff. And so they all really inspire me, So I think that Jordu especially is that there's just something about, he is one of those people where you could look at it and be like, that's a Jordu piece. I can just tell. Yeah. There's like a life to it and like a uniqueness and a almost like ineffable thing that I don't know what it is about that, but it has that feeling of something you did. And so and he's been very kind in teaching me a lot of the things that he knows. And so, yeah, those guys all really inspire me, and for all different techniques. I've learned, and Casey Love too, like another great creature sculptor and painter it's taught me a ton. And so, yeah, I have lots of techniques and different approaches. And I think that you mix and match all those things with different people, and within the community too. Guys like Jason, Wampa's Workshop, Colin. Those guys are, they're phenomenal painters and builders to an almost like an annoyingly humble degree, where you're like, come on, like, you crush this. Like, don't be so humble about it,
Yeah, and they're so great about sharing their knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. And so, like, me and Jason have become friends over the years where we kind of collaborated on this a little bit, where it was like, he was really looking to put that out in the world, and I was really interested in it because I loved the design language of it because it was so similar to Hans Blaster without being Hans Blaster.
Yep.
It had all the same notes, but it didn't read as a ripoff.
Yeah.
And so we chatted a lot about the colors and how to execute it in the real world, and he made a beautiful 3D model. And so it was really fun to have that kind of collaboration or chat back and forth around, a cool piece. And so, yeah, I find inspiration kind of everywhere, and in the real world too. Like, I'm that weirdo that's like taking photos of the rusted gas station thing that's like, oh, that's gonna look good for a project later or something, and so I think that I've been trying to draw a lot more inspiration too from concept art recently, things that didn't get made.
Same. The art of books are fantastic.
Yeah, they're really like, I don't know that I've been inspired by something quite as much as Doug's book.
Oh yeah.
In the last few years, where like I just sat there and read the whole thing and was just like blown away by the approach and the insight to the approach, and then that whole concept of world building and executing that. And I think that a lot of why I got into this was walking some steps in that path, you know, that like feeling like what they did at ILM or whatever. And so that insight is super inspiring. And it's like there's like less pressure to some degree. Like if you make something from concept, you don't have the final version of it, and so what your version of it is good.
Yeah.
As opposed to with Akbar, I'm keep chasing this thing that I may never reach, you know, of how exactly how I want it to be. And so I find all of that really inspiring, and that aspect of the art inspiring. Yeah.
Cool. If you could give one piece of advice to somebody that's getting into the part of the hobby that you focus on, what would it be?
To just start. You know what I mean? So like, I think we all mull it over or have the idea of like, I could do this, but they put it on the back burner, or they think that it's too expensive, or like that they find reasons why they shouldn't do it, as opposed to just go make something. And like, it's probably gonna hook you in that you're like, I built that thing. And there's gonna be things that come and go from your collection, but that thing, I still have the first thing I ever painted. That little Nerf blaster over there is like, I'm never gonna get rid of it, right? Because I had never painted a single thing until I repainted a Nerf blaster. And so I think that and I had thought about that sort of stuff for a long time. I'd seen costumes and that sort of thing, but like, I'm like, well, why would I make that, you know? And so I think giving yourself the permission to just start it and do the thing, I think would say. And I think I'd also like to not be afraid to call yourself an artist. You know, that like ultimately I think sometimes like, oh, I'm not an artist, I'm a cosplayer. I'm not an artist, I'm a collector. It's like, if you make something and it resonates with you, that's art. Yeah. And no one can tell you what art is or is not. Right. Right. And so like, I think that we are afraid to call ourselves artists because we know there are artists that are amazing out there. Just because you're not Doug Chang or Jordu Shell doesn't mean you're not an artist. Right. And so I think embracing that and embracing that you don't really know where that journey will take you, I think is really cool. That I couldn't have predicted when I painted a Mando helmet that I'd end up with Vlania. You know what I mean? Right. And so I think following those interests and those passions, and also to not chase what's hot. This is not that cool. You know what I mean? Like I think it's so rad, but like it's not popular. It's not, it's niche. And if it resonates with you, to roll with that and to own that and to make it your thing and to not try to make the thing because it's hot right now. You know, those would be probably the not one, but probably 3 things I would tell someone getting into this.
Very cool. Well, where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram at JPFXArt. If you happen to be into strength and conditioning, you can find me at Force Perform as well. That's my real world. You know, if you're interested in that side of things, they used to be one entity, and I separated them because the people that are into strength and conditioning weren't looking to see Vlania, and the people that were there was not a lot of crossover. There was a couple. There was like 4 or 5 guys that do what I do. They were like, every time I painted something, they were like, hell yeah, this is so cool. But the Venn diagram was very small, right? And so, but yeah, if you're interested in training or anything like that, that's what I do in a day job. You can check it out. But yeah, JPFX Art on Instagram is where you can find me. And if you're ever interested in paint and I'm an open book from all the people that I learn. I don't gatekeep anything. So. Yeah. I was just telling someone how I achieved the little N1 Starfighter finish the other day. Yeah. Just like these are the things I use, and I would do it this way. And so, yeah, like I think it's the more people that can get into this, the better, and that ultimately this is a community thing. That's why we're standing here, is this community of people. Yep, exactly. Fantastic. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you coming on and talking with me today. Thanks for coming to me. It's been amazing. Yeah. So. Absolutely. Thanks for coming on, and we'll catch you guys next time on the next episode. Thanks. See you guys.